The group finally arrived at the abandoned city, where the system announced that a disaster would occur in 6 hours. They needed to quickly eliminate all the monsters and escape through the portals that would appear randomly. Only 20 portals would manifest, and they would not allow others to use them. As their timing began, the group was relieved to finally confront the monsters. Since there were only 13 of them, they wouldn't have to compete with each other for portal access. Song boasted confidently about his ability to defeat all the monsters. Yigixio noted that because they wouldn't use anyone else's portal, the number of monsters would be limited. Juno expressed concern that if more portals were opened, it might cause problems for others trying to use the portals and wondered if it could be a trap set by the tower. Another member suggested that it would make sense to go through the portal as soon as it opened. Juno proposed a pact: if they found a portal, they should escape without killing additional monsters. Song made a strange face, which Yigixio pointed out. Song dismissed it as nothing unusual. Hong felt that they were functioning well as a team, given that they were making plans together. However, a girl refused to adhere to the rule of avoiding the other portals and declared that she would kill anyone who tried to order her around. Hong considered ganging up on her. The scene shifts to 12 hours earlier, where Song had admonished the girl for her behavior, saying that without a gun, she would be as good as useless. In a fit of anger, the girl punched Song so hard that the others were shocked. She confronted him, asking if he thought he had multiple lives. Hoang intervened, asking the girl to stop causing trouble. He had come to deal with a potential star killer but never expected to encounter a real one. The girl stood in front of him, saying they met again. When Hoang asked if she had anything to say, he didn't think they were in a place for polite greetings. He felt something strange, so he stepped back. The system then indicated that the girl had marked him as her main target, leaving him puzzled. Hoang tried to forget the encounter. Meanwhile, Song focused on defeating monsters to increase his experience points. He found a portal and noted that although he had only killed a few monsters, he had secured the portal quickly. He considered entering the portal, but when he heard a voice, he turned around and was shocked to find Hoang behind him. He asked Hoang what he was doing there. Hoang questioned if Song was doing something wrong that would make him scared. Song denied it, explaining that he thought Hoang had already gone ahead by opening a portal. Hoang then asked if Song had opened a portal, to which Song replied no and told him to stop talking nonsense before kicking him aside to pass through the portal. Afterward, Hoang felt that Song would definitely try to cause trouble and realized he had another problem to deal with. The guide then warned him to prepare for the Day of Blood, stating that if he were killed on that day, the Star Killer would receive a substantial reward. Hoang began running, contemplating that he didn't know when that day would come but suspected it would be advantageous for the Star Killer and result in many deaths. He encountered a level 10 orc that was about to attack him. Hoang defeated it to gain experience and resolved to become as strong as possible before the Day of Blood. After killing the orc, he discovered that no new dates had appeared. Even though Hoang could potentially defeat all the monsters on that floor if he had enough time, he chose not to, as others had not yet escaped. He also needed to be cautious of Song, who was killing monsters as well. While walking, he noticed a strange smell and wondered what it was. The guide informed him that while all orcs had a foul odor, those that left a portal behind would be significantly more pungent. Hoang turned angrily towards the orc, rushed to slash it with his sword, and was pleased to see the portal appear. Siwei approached Hoang, her body trembling, while Hoang sat near the corpse of the orc, lamenting his bad luck. She asked if he wasn't usually unlucky. He replied that he had never won anything in his life and that random luck missions were the worst kind for him. He suspected that he was intentionally avoiding orcs that opened portals because Sioi wanted to kill him on the Day of Blood. She had no choice but to let him deal with the orcs, since if he died without securing a portal, it would be detrimental for her. The system announced that only 5 escape portals remained. Hoang thought it was fortunate that others were progressing smoothly. He acted differently now, irritated that only 5 portals were left, feeling that the prime curse had struck again with the random luck games. Sioi, feeling scared, told him to be quiet and focus on the hunt. Hoang rushed ahead to kill another orc, reflecting that each time he cut down an orc, he felt both regret and a peculiar sense of refreshment. It was akin to his relationship with Sioi. He would see her worried about him, which only reinforced his sense of her desire to kill him. Hoang told Sioi that he was the one who hadn't found a portal and asked why she seemed anxious. She insisted she wasn't anxious. He then asked how many portals she had opened. Sioi replied that she had opened 5. Hong thought that was quite a lot, but still within the acceptable range, considering she had 5 and he had 1. With the others each having 1 portal, that left 3 more. The system displayed that only 3 portals remained, and Hong realized that only the 4th floor portals were left. He wondered if it was just he and Seoi remaining and decided it was time to split up. He checked the time, only 10 minutes were left, and rushed ahead to find a portal, urging her to move on. Seoi asked him to wait, and when he questioned if she had more to say, he reminded her of the dwindling time. As she hesitated, Hong felt something was off and decided to leave. Just as he was about to go, Seoi grabbed his shirt, saying she had forgotten where her portal was. Hong was shocked, thinking she had no sense of direction. As Hoang reached the next floor, Song, looking unusually pleased, rushed towards him with a strange expression of happiness. Hong punched Song, sending him stumbling backward, and told him he was frightened by his presence, suspecting that his mission was still incomplete. Seoi remarked that Song resembled an orc. Hoang told her there was no need to say it so loudly. Yixio was relieved to see Seoi arrive safely. Juno expressed his relief, noting that even though she had been their enemy in the past, they were now like a team and he looked forward to working with her. He extended his hand towards her, but she turned away, calling him noisy. Song wished for Seoi to get stuck on the 4th floor and die. Seoi told him to stop and referred to him as a pig. Song flexed, boasting about his muscles and talking a lot, but Seoi ignored him. Hong wondered if he should leave her behind, but decided it didn't make sense for the Star Killer blessed by the system to die simply from being lost. He saw it as an opportunity to make her indebted to him, though he would still need to be wary of her. He didn't think she would do anything until the Day of Blood, so for now, things should be fine. Suddenly, the rabbit appeared behind them, noting that everyone seemed to be getting used to things and that he was finally there. Seoi immediately used her gun to blow off the rabbit's head, asking why it had returned. The others were shocked by Seoi's aggressive behavior towards the rabbit. The rabbit regenerated its head and remarked that Seoi's intense greeting was unexpected, given they hadn't seen each other for a while. It then kicked her, sending her crashing into the wall, causing her to get injured. Hoang was stunned by how easily the rabbit had sent Seoi crashing into the wall. Considering the rabbit's stats, he wondered if it had gone easy on her and if the Star Killer's status was so significant in the tower. The rabbit told them to calm down, stating it was still too early for it to finish its work. It was now time for the next mission for everyone. The rabbit told them that before they could move to the next floor, they would need to change the lobby background. With a snap of his fingers, he transformed the area into a library. Taking out a book, he informed them that each of them would need to choose 1 book. The book could either be useful, helping them to survive, or useless, leading to their demise, so they had to choose carefully. Song questioned whether a mere book should determine their fate. Juno asked if finding a sword technique manual would make him stronger. The rabbit explained that they could not reveal the contents of their books to anyone else, and all the books would disappear once the mission on the 5th floor started. He urged them to select a book they wouldn't regret choosing. As the rabbit disappeared, the others calmed down and began searching for their books. One girl suggested they start looking for the book they would need. Hoang observed that everyone seemed to be searching in categories related to their classes, which he thought was expected. He felt that searching outside their areas of expertise would be a waste of time. Meanwhile, the guide was prompting him to spend time on a novel. Hoang finally chose a book titled SSS Ransk Returner's Monopoly of the Connections. He knew he couldn't share the contents with anyone else. Although the book's name seemed useless, he figured it must be recommended for a reason, so he decided to read it first. To his dismay, he found it to be one of those trashy, mass-produced fantasies. Hong learned about Song, Juno, and Yixio from the book and felt disheartened, wishing he had chosen a sword technique or martial arts manual instead. He saw another man setting up a tent and wondered what kind of book he had received. Meanwhile, he heard Seoi in the background saying she would kill the rabbit next time. Hong decided to ignore Seoi for now. As the book selection time ended, they were all transferred to the 5th floor. They found themselves sitting in a classroom with other students, and it seemed that time had stopped. A girl remarked that it felt like they were becoming younger again. Hong wondered if they had returned to their student days to fit the mission's theme. He glanced at Song and thought about how he looked during his school days. Yixio told Hong that he didn't seem much different. As Hong looked at her, he noticed that she looked good even as a younger version of herself. He then turned to Seoi and questioned if she was really Seoi. Seoi, wearing glasses, broke them as she asked what he was staring at. Hoang realized she hadn't changed at all. A voice over the speaker asked if they were cherishing their returned youth. It explained that youth was a beautiful thing and that the fifth floor mission involved role-playing in a dimension where both humans and monsters existed. Starting now, they were all cadets at an academy training to become monster hunters. The rabbit, speaking through the speaker, continued that for the next 4 days, quests would appear periodically. Failure to complete a quest would result in a death mission, so they needed to give their best effort. Zhou thought that although he had survived the death mission, it would be difficult for a normal player to endure it. He regretted not choosing a sword technique manual instead of a useless novel. The rabbit announced that it was time to give them the memories needed for the roleplay. A light flashed and struck the minds of the students. After a moment, Hoang felt fascinated, as if he had 2 sets of memories coexisting in his mind. The new memories included the content he had read in the book. The rabbit informed them that the quest would start after the class ended and advised them to enjoy the present as much as possible. The teacher then taught them about the most effective way to amplify their mana instantaneously. Juno told Hoang that the people who had been frozen in time were now moving. Hoang thought that if they were in a novel, he and the others were mere extras, while a boy sitting among them was the protagonist named Yoon. Yoon was also a returner who knew the future and, thanks to his information, had monopolized numerous connections with people and places, becoming the strongest. The teacher pointed at the board and asked if anyone wanted to try answering the question. He mentioned that correct answers would earn store points. Hoang thought the question was at a level that most students would struggle with and that it was likely intended for Yoon. When Yoon made an excuse to avoid answering, Hoang stood up and said that the material in question was action, currently being researched by Professor Brown's team from Columbia University. The teacher remarked that it seemed there was a genius in their class. Hoang earned some store points and realized why the guide had recommended the novel to him. He wondered if the sword technique manual and martial arts manual were even necessary, considering that he would secure all the valuable connections first. After the class ended, the students were walking out. Song approached Hoang and asked how he knew what had happened in the class. Hoang replied that it was from the memories given to him. Song remarked that it seemed like Hoang was always given the good roles. Hoang suggested that if Song was jealous, he should go talk to the tower himself. Yizel then asked when Hoang thought the quest would start. Hoang responded that, based on what he had read in the novel, it should be happening around now. They all received a quest mission to clean out the dungeon that had appeared next to the B-37 building of the Academy within 60 minutes. Hoang thought that the item dropped by the boss monster of this dungeon was extremely important and would play a significant role in the future. Originally, Yoon was supposed to obtain it, but Hoang was determined not to let him take it. They rushed to the location. When they arrived, Yoon was already there, looking confused. He asked how they had all gotten there, but no one answered. Instead, Jiang immediately rushed forward to slash at an orc. Hoang asked Yoon if he thought he was the only one to find this place. Yoon was shocked and wondered how they had managed to locate it, noting that they were all very strong, especially Hoang and Song. He realized there was no way he could forget people as powerful as them, and at this rate, they might steal the prize right from under his nose. Determined not to let that happen, Yoon brandished his spear and attacked the orcs. The spear killed several orcs at once before returning to Yoon's hand. Song was astonished by the display, and Yizel commented on its immense power. Hoang thought that seeing a protagonist in real life made him seem even more overpowered. He decided he wouldn't easily relinquish the dungeon reward, and now it was a matter of who would come out on top. With the current momentum, they were likely to complete the quest without any issues, but to earn the right to challenge the boss monster, they would need to kill the most orcs. Although Yoon was currently stronger than Hoang, Hoang was an expert at finding monsters. Song thought she had lost to Hoang's petty tricks before, but she wasn't going to let that happen again. Hoang continued to kill several monsters, even stabbing one with his sword. Song was shooting with her gun when an orc hit her with its weapon, but she dodged and took it down. Yoon used his spear to kill orcs as well. Yizel remarked on how incredible the 3 of them were, noting that Juno seemed to think Hoang was more desperate than usual. Hoang was showing his noble heart by not wanting to see them sent on a death mission. Juno commented that Hoang was going to great lengths for the gem, and those who voted for the death mission were ensuring that the others would survive. This made everyone emotional. Juno expressed her deep appreciation for Hoang's dedication and became enraged, urging everyone to work harder for the sake of their light. As they all cheered, Hong was confused by their reaction. Finally, after defeating all the orcs, they stood in front of the boss room. The system announced that the person who had obtained the right to challenge the boss monster was Yoon. Hong was furious, feeling that despite his best efforts, it still wasn't enough. He wondered what he should do now and whether he had to simply give up. As Yoon approached the gate to open it, Hong called out to him, asking for permission to challenge the boss himself. Yoon, confused by the sudden request, asked what Hong was talking about. Hong responded, asking if Yoon didn't want to know the way to end the cycle of regressions. He was determined not to give up easily. As Hong entered the boss room, Yoon pointed his weapon at him and demanded to know who he was. Hong asked Yoon to lower his sword, but Yoon insisted on an answer and questioned how Hong knew he was a regressor. Hong asked if that information was important. Yoon pressed the point of his weapon against Hong's neck, making a small cut. Hong then asked if Yoon wanted to see the winter that occurred when he was 32 years old. Yoon remembered a past moment when he was in a building with a man while it rained outside. The man had explained that the regression began in November when Yoon was 17 years old, and that living through the prime years of life from 17 to 32 repeatedly was something he envied. The man had also mentioned wanting to see the winter from when Yoon was 32 years old. Yoon expressed his frustration, saying he was sick of the cursed regression and wanted to stop reminiscing about it. Hong offered a deal if Yoon allowed him to challenge the boss, he would reveal how Yoon could end the cycle of regression. Hong believed that escaping the endless curse of regression had been his dream for millennia, and that Yoon would have no choice but to accept his request. Yoon withdrew his spear and, as he left, warned Hong that if he acted foolishly, things would turn very ugly for him. The system announced that Yoon had allowed Hong to challenge the boss. Hong felt a sense of accomplishment as he entered the boss room. The boss appeared before him, and Hong immediately sensed its formidable strength. He tried to remain calm, noting that since they were in a novel, he didn't have any specific information or guides about the boss. However, he knew how to defeat it. The orc boss roared, using a skill called Orc Warrior's Roar. Hong realized that this roar was designed to intimidate challengers and diminish their will to fight. Despite the roar's effect, which could severely disorient most challengers, Hong's impeccable senses were not only heightened but also capable of countering the roar's impact. The sound-based mind attack had no effect on him, so he charged forward to attack. Hong devised a strategy based on the observation that while the orc's upper body was as hard as steel, its lower body was significantly weaker. He dodged the orc's attack and aimed his sword at the orc's legs, successfully bringing it to its knees. Hong slashed the orc boss, declaring that the reward would be his. After defeating it, the boss dropped several items, and Hong successfully cleared the dungeon. Later, Hong and Song played rock, paper, scissors. Song lost again and was extremely frustrated. Hong noted that this was his 11th consecutive win. Song questioned whether Hong was cheating, to which Hong responded that cheating in such a game was absurd and demanded Song hand over the gold. Juno expressed her delight, complimenting Hong on his skill at rock, paper, scissors. Hong thought about the mythical items mentioned in the novel. Two notable ones were Gungnir, Yoon's weapon, known for its power to always hit its target, and the Ring of Nikki. While the options were simple, the Ring of Nikki was as powerful as Gungnir and would serve as a reliable asset in the many challenges ahead. Although Yoon would have to continue without the ring, Hong planned to provide him with the necessary information. Ultimately, there was only one thing Hong truly desired from the novel. Just then, Song approached Hong and asked him to play rock, paper, scissors against her. She believed the game was a matter of pure luck, but also a test of agility, and she had a close to 50 agility stat. Hong inquired about the stakes, and Song set the amount at 3,000 gold. Hong, however, suggested raising it to 5,000 gold. Song was shocked by the increase. The next day, they all gathered at the gate. Hong thought it was a classic scene from novels, a crucial moment involving the evaluation of strength, often measured by striking a punch machine. A bald man instructed everyone to use their weapons to attack the crystal. The resulting magic power would be displayed as a value, and these points would be used to form their dungeon practical group 2 days later. Yoon commented that it was a great system and expressed curiosity about the strength of the cadets present. The first cadet took his turn and scored 43 points, which seemed impressive. Juno remarked that, based on their reactions, that number was considered high. Hong recalled from his injected memories that the boy was indeed quite strong. The bald man then called for the next participant, which was Juno. Juno struck the crystal and scored 69 points, leaving the students astonished. Juno proudly acknowledged his strength. Song pushed Juno aside, claiming he was the best at punching the machine. When Song took his turn, he scored 75 points, which intimidated the onlookers. Finally, Sue shot at the crystal with her gun and achieved an impressive 98 points. The students went wild with excitement at the extraordinary results. A boy exclaimed that it was impossible to infuse mana into a gun. Hoang thought that his tower teammates seemed much stronger than the academy cadets. When Yoon took his turn at the machine, he scored 115 points. After the tests, they all went to have a meal. Song questioned why Hong didn't get even better results, expressing skepticism about the point of the exercise since it offered no rewards. Yizel remarked on how clear Hong's speech was, even with food in his mouth. Juno mentioned that he was starting to see Hong in a new light. Hong realized that he needed to be in the same dungeon practical group as Yoon, and he couldn't afford to score so low that he would end up as a group leader. While they were eating, they received their second quest to rescue Yoon. Everyone was shocked by the announcement. Yizel noted that Yoon was the strong cadet they had seen in the dungeon the previous day. Juno agreed and wondered if Yoon had fallen into some kind of trap. They had only 1 hour to act, so they hurriedly set off. Hong thought about the situation, recalling that after Yoon's regression, he had taught several lessons within the academy. One of those lessons involved a thug who was the only son of Park, the guild leader of Red Room, one of the top 10 guilds. Park revealed that his high-ranking hunters, his direct subordinates, had beaten Yoon to the point of near death. In the novel, Yoon was saved by sheer luck and the intervention of someone, but that was only possible because Yoon had the Ring of Nikki. As Hoang and the others rushed to the scene, Yizel remarked that if the situation was severe enough to put Yoon in danger, it was likely very dangerous indeed. Hoang agreed and noted that they needed to be prepared for a tough fight, as their opponents would be formidable and not easily defeated with standard methods. Despite how strong Yoon was, he was still an academy cadet, and they had to rescue him at all costs. The scene shifted to Yoon, who was in pain, surrounded by several men. One of them, glaring at Yoon, demanded to know how Yoon had dared to cross their young master and commented on Yoon's apparent fearlessness. Suddenly, a magic attack struck the men, causing them to stagger. It was Sue who had intervened. Hoang asked her why she had done that, and she simply replied that she didn't like them. Song then rushed to attack the assailants, expressing his disdain for people who had no backing. Finally, Hoang drew his sword and remarked on how different his teammates were. He then rallied the others to attack. One of the men used a shield to protect himself, while another used a sword to block their strikes and questioned whether they were indeed academy cadets. Another man wondered if they could land a hit on them. Hoang observed that although Sue's attack appeared reckless, her timing was impeccable. With 3 enemies to contend with, and the disparity in their abilities being significant, the only way to create an opening was through a surprise attack, exactly what Sue had provided. Yoon seized the opportunity and began attacking the men. As they engaged in battle, Yoon mentioned to the group that there was no time to discuss how the enemies had appeared. Hong suggested saving thanks for later and focusing on resolving the current situation. Song targeted one of the men, believing him to be the weak link. However, when Song punched the man, he encountered such overwhelming pressure that he was forced to fall back. The others were shocked by the unexpected strength of their opponent. The man laughed and explained that since they had only been exposed to the world within the academy, it was only natural that they wouldn't understand how dangerous the real world could be. Soon, the villains attacked them all. Hong engaged one of the attackers. While Yoon and Juno dealt with the other two, Hong instructed Seong to protect them from the rear as much as possible. Even though they had already fought on the front lines several times, Siyu, meanwhile, was shooting and questioned who Hong thought he was to give such orders. The injured were sent to Yizel for healing before rejoining the front line. Juno, astonished that his wounds were healed so quickly, realized there was a cadet with impressive healing abilities. Amid the battle, Hong remarked that, although their enemies were formidable, there was no quest they would be given that couldn't be cleared. Now was the time to use the skills they had learned from their books. Juno executed a thaw slash, while Song used the first punch of the first king, the leader of the villains wondered about the quest and the book. He thought it was absurd that they had time to discuss such things and concluded that the attackers must be underestimating them. As the blasts subsided and the fog began to clear, Hoang observed that the three opponents were incredibly strong. After overcoming previous missions together, he felt that he and his team were united in a way that would make them difficult to defeat. The experience these three had working together was on an entirely different level. Although they operated in a tightly knit three-man formation, Hoang realized that if he and his team could defeat one of them, the others would quickly fall apart. However, he saw no opportunities to achieve this, as it felt like he was facing an impenetrable iron door. Yezel, while healing the others, urged them to hang on and promised to support them. One of the opponents remarked on their persistence and noted that the hunters in their country had a bright future ahead. The second opponent warned that it wasn't the time to relax and that if they let things continue, the situation would become dangerous for them as well. Finally, the third opponent, filled with anger, leaped in to attack Yezel first. Yoon shot his spear at the man, stating that he wouldn't be able to do it quickly. The man was hit slightly and wondered what was happening, convinced that he had dodged the attack. Meanwhile, the other two opponents also began their assault, with one of them reprimanding the others for rushing in. Hoang realized that the formation of the three had already been disrupted, and what had once seemed like an indomitable iron wall now had an opening. The man who had jumped in, now enraged, declared that he would kill them all. Hoang could sense their anxiety and impatience. As they were being delayed longer than they had anticipated, he knew the source of their frustration. As the three attackers pressed on, Hoang asked if they were okay, mentioning that their chairman must be quite furious by now. The three opponents looked confused, with one of them filled with anger, demanding to know what Hoang was talking about. Hoang explained that Park was growing impatient. The other two wondered how Hoang knew their chairman. Hoang replied that countless people had died for getting on Park's nerves. As the three opponents were in shock, Yoon Soo and Hoang combined their efforts to attack the one in the middle and defeated him. As the first opponent collapsed, the second one laughed and suggested that they stop there. He proceeded to help the injured one and remarked that Chairman Park would still be a problem if they returned like this. However, they had seen the hunters who represented the future of Korea and had no regrets. The two helped the injured man to walk, while the third opponent said they were doing as they pleased and wished them well. With that, the three of them left. Hoang and the others were relieved to have won and completed their task. Hoang reflected on how close they had come to failure. Noting that they had only 2 minutes left to complete the mission, Yoon asked Hoang if he knew what would happen that day. Hoang replied that since they had helped Yoon, he should thank them first. Yoon muttered a thank you in a low voice, prompting Hoang to ask him to speak up. As he hadn't heard it clearly, Hoang thought about Yoon's regression. Noting that it had undergone the most changes and that he had never experienced anything like it in his previous regressions, Yoon thanked Hoang again, and Hoang advised him to be prepared for the future, warning that the upcoming regressions would be more challenging than any he had faced before. Yoon asked if Hoang was also a regressor. Hoang denied it, stating that there was an existence even greater than that. Yoon, surprised, placed a hand on Hoang's shoulder and asked where he was going. Hoang had forgotten to tell Yoon something important: how to escape the curse of regression. The next day, in class, the bald teacher prepared to announce the groupings for the dungeon practical the following day. As he went through the groupings, Hoang reflected on how well Yoon understood how to handle things. He guessed that the protagonist's ability to make the impossible seem plausible was part of what made their realities hard to believe. The teacher announced that Yoon would be in the fourth group with Jiho, Sung, Yang, and Hoang was pleased, as this aligned with his plans, and he was grateful to Nikki joined Yoon's group to maximize their chances of getting the best rewards. But there was no time for celebration. In the evening, Hoang was with Yoon, who revealed that the dungeon for their practical was likely to go berserk. While such phenomena occasionally occurred, it was unusual for them to happen simultaneously. Yoon struggled with this issue in every regression but had never been able to uncover the cause. Yoon hoped that Hoang would share any information he had. If Hoang's existence was something greater than that of a regressor, Yoon believed he must know something. Hoang considered the novel's development and realized that, according to it, 3 groups, including Group 4, would experience the dungeon going berserk. Of those, only Group 4, which included Yoon, would avoid being wiped out. The novel didn't specify the cause of the berserk event. Hoang apologized, admitting that he didn't have all the answers. Yoon, frustrated, grabbed Hoang's collar and demanded to know if they couldn't at least try to do something. Hoang insisted he really didn't know. He thought the author never provided any hints throughout the novel and ended that part vaguely. leaving him unsure of what to do next. See you. Having overheard their conversation, came over to check on them, seeing them both gripping each other's collars and with one of their shirts off, she felt uneasy and muttered that she had lost again. Both Yoon and Hong quickly clarified that it wasn't what she thought. The next day, the bald teacher instructed Group 4 to enter the dungeon. Upon entering, they received their mission to clear the dungeon they had been assigned for their practical. Hong recalled Siu's warning not to get too close to her, and he realized he still needed to address the dungeon berserk incident. Amidst the strange misunderstanding, Yoon suggested that the group split up to explore the dungeon and use the radio to communicate if anything happened. Hong walked thoughtfully. Considering that the groups involved in the dungeon berserk incidents were Groups 4, 9, and 12. Group 4 was his own, Group 9 included Yezel and Siu, and Group 12 consisted of Song. He felt confident that Group 9 would be safe due to Yezel's healing abilities and the Holler Star, which was blessed by the tower and would be hard to defeat on the 5th floor. He hoped Song would perform well. As he continued, he encountered some wolves and decided to focus on handling them first. While drawing his sword, he felt a presence behind him and turned to find Yang standing there, crying and apologizing. Hong was perplexed by Yang's tears and wondered why he was so upset. Hoang had just killed all the wolves and was still grappling with Yang's lingering resentment. Yang admitted that since then, he hadn't had the courage to speak to Hong and should have approached him earlier. He apologized once more, expressing his regret. Hoang had previously thought of Yang as tender-hearted, but he reassured Yang that there was no need for further apologies. He explained that if a similar situation arose, Yang would need to make the same decisions. The challenges they faced were as real as it gets, and in the Tower of the End, where death could come at any moment. Yang wouldn't survive with such a soft heart. Hong advised Yang to learn to think of himself first to survive there, so Yang shouldn't feel guilty. Yang remarked on how amazing Hong was. Hong turned to him and said he didn't understand what Yang was talking about. Yang insisted that Hong must have been someone incredible before the end. Hong reflected on his past and remembered that, despite growing up in an orphanage and facing discrimination, he had to fight desperately to survive. Before he knew it, he was already in his late 20s, working a regular salaried job that barely allowed him to make ends meet. The only reason he ended up in his current position was a simple coincidence. If it hadn't been for what happened back then, he might not have survived until now. And he doubted he was in a position to teach anyone anything. Yang called out, asking what he was thinking about so intently. Hoang replied that it was nothing. Yang thanked him again, noting that although Hoang had advised him to prioritize his own survival, Hoang had put himself in danger to save others. Yang expressed his desire to be like Hoang, someone who could help others. Hoang reflected on the importance of focusing on what lay ahead. As their path was forward, Yang placed his hand on the rock wall beside them, and Hoang asked if Yang sensed anything unusual. Yang confirmed that there was something leaking from the wall. Hoang thought that he couldn't detect anything with his impeccable senses and wondered if this was something only an adventurer could sense with their search skills. He then asked Yang to step back and used his sword to strike the wall. Immediately, they were both transported to a labyrinth. Hoang was astonished, noting that this labyrinth had never appeared in the novel or in any of the infinite regressions Yang had gone through. This led him to only one conclusion: the labyrinth was not created by the author and might contain clues about why the dungeon berserk occurred. As they ventured further, they encountered monsters who questioned how they had arrived there. Hoang was shocked by their appearance and wondered what kind of creatures they were. One of the monsters informed Jamba that the two newcomers, especially the larger one, were not supposed to be characters in the story and that their presence could significantly alter the plot. The monster then revealed a major spoiler to Yang. Jamba then addressed Hong, saying they needed to talk. A group of dwarfs surrounded Hong, with one asking who he was. Hong replied that he was a reader who had read about their world. Another dwarf asked if, when Hong opened his eyes, he found himself within the novel. Hoang responded that it was somewhat like that. As they continued talking, Hoang inquired about their identities. The dwarfs explained that they were fairy repairmen who fixed holes in poorly written novels. Hoang realized that they were indeed part of the narrative. One of the dwarfs wondered aloud about the whereabouts of his hammer. Hoang remarked that the dwarfs must have a tough job, given the numerous holes they had to fix. They became emotional, appreciating his recognition of their hard work. One of them admitted that the novel was considered total trash by Hong as well. Hoang agreed and mentioned how difficult it had been for him to finish reading it. One of the dwarfs revealed that he had originally planned to bury Hoang underground, but instead decided to erase his memories and let him go. Hoang was taken aback by the horrifying suggestion and insisted that he couldn't allow them to do that. If he lost his memories, all the effort he had put into finding the labyrinth would be meaningless. He explained that he knew about the dungeon berserk on the 3rd floor and the significant hole that would occur at that time, a problem they had yet to resolve. The dwarfs were shocked and asked how Hong knew about this. Hong explained that despite the novel's poor quality, he had learned some things from it. He offered that he might be able to provide them with a solution. Finally, Hong and Yang emerged from the labyrinth. Seeing Hong's face, Yang asked what was wrong and if he had been tortured. Hong reminded Yang that he had mentioned an idea to fix the situation. One of the dwarfs remarked that if they left it as it was, it would surely become the biggest plot hole in the novel so far. If that happened, their reputation as fairy mechanics would be tarnished. He agreed to listen to Hong's idea. Hong proposed combining the 3 dungeons that would go berserk into one, using a portal to merge them all at the same time. Another dwarf commented that combining the dungeons into one would make the situation seem more natural compared to having all 3 dungeons go berserk unexpectedly. Another dwarf agreed, noting that while the idea was convincing, if the size of the combined dungeon increased, the reward for clearing it would need to be proportionally larger. The third dwarf agreed, stating that this was a consequence that even they couldn't alter. Hoang realized that they were concerned about potentially disrupting the story if Yang received a higher reward than anticipated. Hoang asked if it would work if he were the one receiving the reward. The dwarfs began discussing among themselves, and Hong thought that the die had been cast and he was leaving the rest to the Nikki Yuring. One of the dwarfs suggested that it might be better to erase Hoang's memory, as any additional reward achieved could complicate matters further. Hoang denied that proposal and tried to move past the mention of the Nikki Yuring. Yang, distraught, slapped Hoang several times, crying and pleading for him to wake up. He pulled out a hammer and wondered what the dwarfs had done to Hoang, just as he was about to strike with the hammer. Hoang assured him that he was all right. Yang relaxed when he saw Hoang was back to normal. Afterwards, they continued on their way, and Yang apologized to Hoang, expressing his concern that Hoang had lost his memories. Hoang reflected on their luck, noting that there was a limit on the 5th floor's mission, and that there was no need to erase the memories of someone who would be leaving soon. Hoang then noticed the hammer Yang was holding and inquired about it. Yang explained that the dwarfs had taken Hoang with them but left the hammer behind, so he had taken it for safekeeping. Hoang explained that the hammer was a unique item and surmised that Yang wasn't just a weak and fragile newcomer. Since Yang had made a secret contract with the fairies, a mission exclusive to him had been created to avoid becoming a disruption in the storyline. There was a condition for Yang to complete his tasks discreetly. If he managed to do so, he would be eligible for a special reward. Suddenly, the floor began to shake, and the system announced that due to an unknown energy, the dungeon had gone berserk. Stronger monsters started appearing as the 3 dungeons merged into one. Yang asked what was happening, and Hong confirmed that the dungeons had indeed been combined. Hoang instructed Yang to stay focused and head northeast to locate the objective. With Yang's search skills, he should be able to avoid dangerous monsters and find the way safely. Hong felt that Yang was stronger than he appeared and realized that if he stayed with Yang, he wouldn't have to worry as much about the dangers they faced. Yang asked about Hoang. The scene shifted to 2 boys from group number 9, who were armed and observing the monsters. They wondered if the dungeon berserk had awakened these creatures. One of the boys thanked Yixel, acknowledging that if it hadn't been for her, they would already be dead. She had been healing them and warned them to watch their backs. A monster attacked one of the boys, but Suyu, with perfect timing, shot it down. She scolded them for panicking and urged them to wake up unless they wanted to become skeletons. Hoang heard the gunfire and realized it was coming from Suyu's group. Although she had an advantage against the poisonous monsters with her gun, she was still a threat to other cadets. Because he needed to act discreetly, Hoang couldn't help them directly. His only choice was to clear the dungeon as quickly as possible. He encountered many monsters but pressed forward, leaving them behind. As Hoang walked, he reached the source of the most toxic smells and found himself face to face with the Scorpion King. The scorpion attacked him with a stream of poison, but he managed to dodge it and pondered how widespread the poison had become. He realized he couldn't get close to it. Hoang thought Yoon and Group 4 would handle things, but the other 2 dungeons required his assistance. Although he might have aimed for the number 1 rank, he couldn't allow such tragedies to occur while he was nearby. He rushed to attack the scorpion, but it countered with its tail, striking him against the wall. Injured, he wondered if he had any other options. Reluctant to use his most valuable resources too soon, he hesitated, knowing he needed to conserve his single-use items from clearing the sub-quest. Hoang activated the perfect shield to protect himself from the poison and moved closer to the scorpion. He thought of it as a cheat item that would allow him to block a single attack. After that, he moved closer to the scorpion and used his sword to slash it, hoping that would be the end. The system confirmed his success in killing the scorpion, and he passed through the portal. He realized that only one dungeon remained, the one where Song was, and wondered if Song was all right. He reflected on his poor first impression of Song and dismissed the idea that Song had made any emotional impact on him. What he felt was more akin to worrying about an enemy. As he surveyed the dungeon, he found no one present. Suddenly, an attack came from beneath the ground. He managed to block it just in time to see a horned mole emerge and attack him. Hong slashed his sword and thought it looked revolting. More moles appeared simultaneously, adding to the assault. Despite their small size, the moles were sharp and fast. Hoang knew that if he didn't stay focused, the situation could become dangerous. He hoped Song was still alive. Meanwhile, Song was engaged in a continuous battle with moles, defeating them one after another. He referred to himself as the Mole Killer, determined to crush every mole in his path. Despite his exhaustion, a mole, observing from behind, prepared to attack Song just then. Hoang arrived and killed the mole. Song was shocked to see Hoang and asked, "How did you get here?" Hoang said, "So Song managed to stay alive." Seeing Hoang, Song became emotional and moved to hug him. Hoang, speaking gently, told Song to keep his distance. He was relieved that Song was safe, but he knew Song hadn't been able to assist his friends. Song apologized, explaining that the moles had attacked them unexpectedly. Hoang thought about how, despite being mere extras in novels, these characters were still human and like his teammates. Song asked Hoang what they should do now and if they could escape the dungeon. At that moment, the ground began to shake, and a giant monster emerged from underground, preparing to attack them. Hoang told Song that there was only one thing they could do: kill the monsters.